Hi, I'm Chris Davidson and welcome to the Ground Source Heat Pump Association Training Academy. The Ground Source Heat Pump Association has been asked to provide a series of videos on heat pumps for training standards officers, and this is session 1. So this is the first of 3 sessions, and our aim is to give you some tools to understand heat pumps and spot the problems that installations may have. Today we'll be introducing the Ground Source Heat Pump Association and how we can help. We'll then discuss why heat pumps are important, and finally we'll look to the future of heat pumps in the UK so you can start to understand the scale of the market that's about to be built. So let's talk about the Ground Source Heat Pump Association first. It's a trade association which aims to further the aims of the industry, and we have several streams. We look at policy development, so we work with government to enhance policy to enhance the deployment of heat pumps in general and ground source heat pumps specifically. We provide training. This is part of the type of training we provide, but we also do sessions for consulting engineers, for practitioners and so on. We publish and maintain standards. We actually have in the UK some of the very best standards anywhere in the world on ground source in particular. We also work quite heavily with the microgeneration certification scheme and help to maintain and deploy their standards. We're here to promote best practice and of course promote the sector in general. So to our members, we represent consultants, installers, manufacturers, drilling contractors, service providers who will maintain systems post-installation. We also represent training providers, suppliers, and we have a number of cross-trade association links and links with government departments. Ground Source Heat Pump Association membership isn't a given. You have to be approved to be a member, and we can and do refuse membership for unsuitable applicants. So for example, if a member company has no experience in the sector, we'll suggest they go and get some experience before we can accept them as members of the Ground Source Heat Pump Association. And similarly, membership can be revoked if members fail to adhere to technical and ethical standards. And we do revoke membership. It's unusual, but we do it. And we do give the opportunity for members to discuss with us the problems they're having in the marketplace before we resort to that. So it does give some kind of protection to your customers and to our members' customers if they are selecting members of the Ground Source Heat Pump Association to do their installation. The other point I'd make is we have a thing called the technical panel, which I sit on. We provide expert opinions to both members and non-members. And the type of advice we provide is, for example, conflicting information. It's very common for a customer to receive 2 quotes and really not be able to compare the 2. And that might not be for any incorrect reason. It might be simply because the 2 companies have a different approach to providing a solution. And both of those approaches might be technically entirely reasonable. Questionable claims. Customers will come to us, particularly people who are looking at the marketplace for a ground source heat pump, and they'll be saying, can I believe the claim on the efficiency of the run cost of this system? And we'll do much more talking about that later on in the series. And then finally, we'll give advice on problem installations. Now that might be a real problem installation in which a technical error has been made, or it could be a perceived problem installation. Perhaps the customer has unrealistic expectations of what the system will do for them. So we could actually be approached by our members to say, I have this customer, we're really struggling to reach agreement that we've delivered what we said we would agree, in which case we can go back to the customer and say, yeah, you've delivered a reasonable system there. It could be a customer, an end user who's come to us and who says, I'm not happy with my system. And we can look at that technically to see if there's been any errors made, and we can actually suggest improvements should they be needed. So why heat pumps? What's the big deal about, and why can nobody in the media at the moment finish a sentence without mentioning heat pumps? Well, electrification of heat is an absolute key element on the path to net zero, and it represents perhaps the biggest single change in homes and in commercial properties, and also the biggest opportunity, because decarbonising heat is very, very difficult. It's one of the most challenging parts of the decarbonisation mix. If you look at it compared to electrification of vehicles, electrification of electricity generation, it's actually a very difficult part of the mix. So The simplest way of electrifying heat and the cheapest way of electrifying heat in terms of install cost is to go direct electric. Now with a direct electric system, that might be a panel heater, it might be electric underfloor, you get 100% of the electrical energy that's consumed by that system transferred into heat, but no more, 100% and no more. If you compare that with an air source heat pump, for every kilowatt of electrical energy you purchase, you get approximately, and it's very approximate, 1 kilowatt of free heat from the atmosphere outside. So it's 200% efficient. For every kilowatt of electricity you buy, you get 2 kilowatts of heat put into the property. And then finally, with a ground source heat pump, they can be much more efficient. And so for every kilowatt of electrical energy you're buying, you can very easily get 4 kilowatts delivered into the property. That's the 1 kilowatt of electricity you buy, plus another 3 kilowatts of free heat from the ground in the case of ground source heat pumps. So in very round numbers, the carbon emissions and the run costs of ground source heat pumps are half that of an air source, which in turn are half that of a direct electric system. Also, it's very important to point out that none of the systems consume any gas, so we are completely getting off gas in heating our homes and domestic hot water with any of these solutions. So let's just touch briefly on the future of heat pumps in the UK. The ambition was laid out 2 years ago now to have over 600,000 heat pumps installed per year from 2028. And that's a massive rise from at the time it was about 30,000 heat pumps going in. This is being driven by planning restrictions on particularly new gas connections, for example. So in our day-to-day business, developers will come to us and say, what's the feasibility of going heat pump on this development because we're no longer able to connect to gas, or we see the end of gas coming, so we don't see it as an investable asset. There are grants and incentives available, and those grants and incentives range from individual domestic properties to community-owned district networks, to larger heat networks, and through to commercial buildings and public sector buildings. And very importantly, they also apply to social housing retrofit, which helps significantly with not only decarbonisation, but also alleviating fuel poverty in that market sector. There are heat zones being declared. Now, the consultation is not yet closed at the time I'm speaking to you on what heat zones look like, but it should give local authorities some kind of powers to declare heat zones in which they can involve some kind of compulsion to connect to a heat network as they roll out. That then leads into ambient heat networks, one of the big buzz phrases in the marketplace at the moment. That's simply a network of pipes running at a very low temperature, which provides water into properties, which can then be used to heat the space under domestic hot water at very high efficiencies. And another point to make is that ground loops, particularly looking at ground source heat pumps now, are increasingly being seen as an asset. So being owned and operated in the same way as gas pipes used to be, as broadband pipes are. You don't pay for the installation of that service, you pay for it per use. And that's a big change in the marketplace, which will have big impacts at both the commercial building scale and the residential building scale. So all this taken together, what we are expecting is exponential growth. And it's a good thing. We will see exponential growth in the installer base in this country. However, that's bound to cause problems. One of those problems is imports of cheap, nasty products. That is particularly likely to happen, unfortunately, in the air source market, which is much more of a commoditised item than it is in the ground source market, where it's more of a systems approach, because you need a heat pump and something in the ground. And there'll be more on the types of heat pumps, how they work and so on in future episodes. And I guess the worst of all scenarios is we see rogue traders. This is a manifold external to a building of a ground source heat pump system, and you can see the frost on that pipes. Several things wrong with it. First of all, those pipes should be insulated, but secondly, this system, if you can see from the gauge, is running at about -9, which is way below the acceptable level for a ground source loop to be running at, which means that loop is simply way undersized. So It's something we'll talk about again in later sessions as to how to spot these kind of problems before they happen. So next time we're going to go into much more detail about heat pumps, and thank you very much indeed for your time.